Hello and welcome to Beginner Oceanography. Today I'm going to be talking about what is an ocean and how many oceans are on Earth. So an ocean is defined as a very large area of seawater, and this is sort of arbitrary, and I'm going to be talking about what this means in oceanography. How many oceans are there on Earth? The first answer is 1, all the water on the Earth, and the second one is between 3 and 5, depending on what your actual definition of an ocean is, based on several parameters that I'm going to discuss. Why am I even talking about what oceans are? Everyone knows what an ocean is, right? Well, the reason why I'm discussing this as the first video of Beginner Oceanography is because if you pick up any introductory to oceanography textbook, you'll see very quickly that they talk about oceanography as the study of oceans, but what actually is an ocean? If you look up a dictionary definition, you'll see that it is a large expanse of sea. What is a sea? A sea is just a large area of salt water. Now, what makes an ocean from these definitions is that they are divided geographically. So it's a geographically distinct area of salt water. Now, if we look at a map of the world, you'll see that all the oceans are interconnected, and that's where the first definition comes into play. The world ocean is just a combination of all these waters. But that doesn't tell us very much about the environment. So if you divide up the ocean into areas by drawing and connecting the continents, you get something that looks like this. And this looks very familiar. It's the Pacific, the Atlantic, and the Indian Ocean roughly geographically placed together, and they're bounded by continents. This is what's known as the three ocean system. So what about the Arctic? Well, if you look at the globe from a top-down perspective, and you convert that to a map, you get something like this, and you can see that the Arctic is mostly bounded by land. Between Russia and North America is the Pacific Ocean, and between North America and Europe is the Atlantic Ocean. In the middle you have the Arctic. You can see that the major water flow, the largest area that lets water through, is on the Atlantic, and so the Arctic is usually considered estuary of the Atlantic in a three ocean system. Now, is the Arctic an ocean or is it a sea, a smaller categorization like the Mediterranean Sea or the Caribbean Sea? So the best argument for making the Arctic an ocean is because it's large. It's twice as large as the next largest sea, which would be the combined Caribbean and Gulf of Mexico. The second is that it's enclosed by land on all sides, and so the water inside the Arctic Ocean would be different from the outside waters. It's separate and distinct from the Atlantic Ocean, and so it could be an ocean all of its own rather than being just an estuary. Why would it be a sea? Well, it's a lot smaller compared to the other oceans. The Arctic's only about a fifth the size of the smallest of the three oceans. Now, if you look at how the Arctic Ocean is defined by the International Hydrographic Organization, and if you aren't familiar with them, they're the organization that deals with bathymetry, with coastlines, with the names of various water bodies. They define the Arctic Ocean in two different ways. The first one is this dark blue shaded area, which includes the coastline, the bays, the more coastal environments, and then this black line is what they consider true ocean, which is very small and therefore would be more sea-like. The second way of defining the Arctic Ocean that I want to bring your attention to is this oceanographer's map, which is based on the actual physical properties in the ocean. In this case, it's based on the average temperature in July, with the red line being where the water is always less than 10 degrees Celsius. This is important to us because this shows that the water inside the Arctic Ocean is distinct from the Atlantic Ocean, distinct from the Pacific Ocean, and actually gives a justification of why the Arctic Ocean is an ocean. And so if you include the Arctic Ocean, then you have this four ocean system, which would be more similar to what you might have seen in grade school. But I mentioned earlier on that there's a Southern Ocean, and this is a trickier question because if you look at the bottom of the globe, you see that Antarctica is surrounded by water on all sides, and there isn't really any land masses like the other four oceans that I've talked about so far to separate the Arctic Ocean from the other oceans. The reason why we would consider the Southern Ocean an ocean at all is because Antarctica is cold, and And by cold, I mean it's much colder on the South Pole than it is on the North Pole. And part of the reason why Antarctica is colder than the Arctic is because there is a current that goes clockwise around Antarctica, known as the Antarctic Circumpolar Current. And what this does is it traps the cold air on Antarctica and keeps it cold. This has a resulting effect of changing the water properties within this region. If we look at our map, this is what the Antarctic Circumpolar Current actually looks like. And you can see it has lots of variation in its actual pathway because it isn't bounded by continents and it isn't bounded by bathymetry. And this current changes over time. It grows, it shrinks, the features move around as a result of the changing of the seasons or winds blowing different ways or a storm coming through. And so it's very hard to use this as a rigorous definition. You have to choose an average. The red line that I've shown on this screen is an average from this textbook, but there are many other alternatives. The IHO, which I was talking about earlier, they define the Southern Ocean as anything below 60 degrees south. And so if you include this on the map of our world, you now have 5 oceans, making the 5-ocean system. But there are variations within this system. These actual separations that I've drawn on this map are not fixed if you go and talk between scientists, between countries, between various organizations. For example, Southeast Asia is always a tricky one because where do you decide to choose one island system versus the next? The Arctic is also fairly tricky, and definitely the Southern Ocean is incredibly tricky based on what you use as the average location. It's further complicated by cases like Australia, which defined arbitrarily everything south of Australia as the Southern Ocean. And you'll notice even the 60 degrees south line for the Southern Ocean is a proposed change, and that's because when they actually proposed the Southern Ocean, it was bundled in a very long document with the names of all the other seas and bays around the world, including the Sea of Japan and the South China Sea, which are quite politically charged. And so this naming conventions and organizations is quite variable because nothing can be finalized without all the countries agreeing. Now, in terms of oceanography and the future videos that I'm going to be making, I'm going to be talking about it in terms of language that the oceanographers use, in which case we have the oceans seen on the screen. You'll see that there's a lot more, and that's because the Pacific, Atlantic, and Indian Oceans are split into the north and south. The reason why this is done is because this map is arranged more along the lines of circulation. And what I mean by that is here's a map of the dominant ocean currents in the surface ocean, and you can see that they form these circular loops right here, which are called gyres. And these have distinct properties across the different loops that tend to behave in certain manners. And so it's important to look at the different hemispheres as almost different oceans. And I will definitely be talking about this more in a future video. In conclusion, an ocean is a geographically distinct area, usually because of continental borders, but also taking into account water properties such as the Antarctic. The actual boundary between oceans remains somewhat arbitrary, but this is a fairly practical definition that I can give you. Thank you very much for watching, and please leave any comments or questions below. Thank you.